Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this video we'll be exploring how we can write a polyfill for promise. So before we get started, let's explore the working of promise. We'll start with the basic syntax, how we implement a promise. So let's set the title for like polyfill for promise. And before we get started, we'll first see how we write a basic promise. So this is how we do, like we create a new object from the promise class, and this takes two methods called resolve and reject, and then in here you can basically either resolve the promise or reject the promise. And then on this promise object you can do dot, then you can chain it, and then you can also handle the promise rejection using catch, and then there is also a method called finally. So this is how the basic syntax looks like. So in this video we will try to implement our own version of promise with these two methods, then and catch. I will not be covering finally part as video will become long. So let's see how we can implement this. So what I'll be doing is we'll be creating a new method called myPromise. Okay, let's attach it to the global this. So global this you can use to access your basically the window object, but this is a variable which provides you a consistent way of accessing the window object in irrespective of environment, for example node or browser. So I'll be attaching it to global this, and this is going to be a function. Okay, now if you see promise, the syntax that I wrote here, it takes a executor, right? So our my promise will also take a executor. Okay, and then we call this executor in here with two methods called resolve and reject, right? So we'll be implementing these two methods, resolve and reject. But before we do that, we know that promise has few states, so let's create those states. So it could be in pending state, let's call it pending. It can be in fulfilled state, and it can be in rejected state. So now we have our states. Okay, good. So what we have done here is we have our myPromise function where we take executor as a callback, and we call this callback with these two methods, and we need to implement these two methods, resolve and reject. But before we do that, let's also put a check for this executor to be a function. So we'll do type of executor to be a function, right? And let's do something like if it's not a function, then we'll throw an error, and we'll say executor should be a function. Makes sense? All right, now let's implement these two functions, resolve and reject. So I'll just copy paste it again. Okay, Also, we'll go ahead and initialize the state of this promise. So by default, we'll say this promise is in pending state. Okay, and we'll also have value for the promise, which I will initialize with undefined. Okay, now coming back to the implementation of resolve function, this function should be executed only if the promise is in pending state. So if this dot state is equal to state dot pending, then only we need to do something. And this is also true for reject callback. So now if the state is pending, what we need to do is first we need to mark it fulfilled in case of resolve, right? So we'll be saying state dot fulfilled, and similarly for reject callback we'll be saying it rejected. Then we also need to store the value. Now this resolve callback will be called with a value, right? So we'll store the value over here, and similarly the reject callback will be called with error, so we'll store the error as well in value. So this looks good. Now what we need to do is we are forgetting one more thing here. So what if this executor itself throws some error? So we need to handle that as well. So let's wrap this in a try catch. So if there is an error thrown from here, catch, let's get the error, and if there is an error, we'll simply reject it with that error. This looks good for now. Okay, now what happens is, if you remember, we have then chaining on promise objects as well, right? And those then methods will have callbacks, so we need to execute as well, right, those callbacks, and they should be executed on resolve or reject, right? So let's create an array to store those callbacks. So I'll be calling them then callbacks, which will store all the then callbacks, and similarly we'll be having a array for storing the catch callbacks. So what we'll do here is, whenever this resolve function will call, we need to call all the callbacks in here, which is stored in our then callback, sorry, and we'll call this callback with this dot value. Similarly we'll do this for catch callback as well. All right, now we will implement the then method for this. So we'll attach it to the prototype, and this is also going to be a function, and then we'll be implementing a catch method as well. So if you know, this method returns a promise, then so we need to return a promise from here. Okay, so let's create this promise here. Let's call it to return, and this will be a new my promise. Again, this will take two methods, resolve reject, and this is a wrong syntax. Now this is good, and then we'll be returning to return. Now if you remember, this then method takes to callback again on fulfilled and on rejected, something like this. Unfulfilled, spelling mistake. Okay, now one may choose not to pass these callbacks, right? So let's handle those cases. So what I'll be doing is I'll be creating internal functions called onFulfilled internal, and here I'll be checking if type of onFulfilled is equal to function, then we'll be using this. Else what I'll do is I'll assign it a function which returns the value. Okay, similarly I'll handle for onRejected also. So I'll call onRejected internal, and type of this, if this is function, that's good, we'll use that. Else what we'll do is we'll have a new function which will, am I doing something wrong? It will throw an error. Why is showing like this? Is any syntax mistake? Okay, this should be like this. Okay, so now we have these two methods. All right, now we need to implement this promise, how this should behave. So what we need to do is we need to check for the state, and based on that we need to handle. So this dot state, if this is state dot fulfilled, then we need to do something. If this is in a rejected state, right, state dot rejected, then we need to do something. And if the state is in pending, then we need to do something. So these are the things that we need to handle. Now what we need to do, if state is in pending, we just need to call this thing, right, onFulfilled internal. So let's do that. So if the state is fulfilled, we simply need to call this dot onFulfilled state with this dot value. Now it is possible that this could throw some error, so we'll wrap this in a try catch, and catch error. So if there is an error, we'll reject it with that error. Okay, this looks good. Now here what we are doing is, now this promise will return something, right? This could be a value, or this could be again a promise, right? It is possible that a promise resolves with a promise again, so we need to handle such cases as well. So let's store this result in a variable called result, and what we'll do is let's create another function to handle these cases. So if this result is a promise, we need to recursively recursively check for the resolved value, and then we'll be resolving that value. So to perform that operation, I'll be creating a separate function. Let's call it promise resolve, or maybe resolve promise, where I'll be using this now here, and I'll be passing it this to return method, the promise, then the result that we have got, and methods to resolve and reject this promise. Okay, now we'll implement this in a while. Before that, let's complete this function over here. Now here I'm assuming that this is going to be a synchronous function, which is not true. So ideally this can be asynchronous, and we need to handle that case as well. So ideally promise these callbacks will be scheduled to a micro task queue. And for now what I'll be doing is I'll be simply using set timeout with a 0 delay. That's not the ideal implementation, but I cannot implement a scheduler which pushes these callbacks to micro task. So for simplicity I'll be using set time with 0 delay. We can alternatively use any browser API which queues the task to micro task queue, something like mutation observer or something, but that will just complicate this solution. So for simplicity I'll be using a set timeout with 0 delay. So what instead I'll be doing is I'll just wrap this thing in a set timeout with 0 delay, and inside this I'll be doing this. Okay, save it. This should format it. It's not formatting it. Okay. So now we have wrapped it in the set timeout. This will take care of the synchronous nature of the result of the this on fulfilled callback. Now we need to do something similar for reject state as well, and I'll be just going ahead and copying this part, and here what we need to call is in this on rejected internal, right? So I think we have some code repetition which we can eliminate, so let's do that. We'll create a function and we'll use that. So let's create a function called state handler. And in here I'll just go ahead and copy paste this thing. Copy paste, and this should be a parameter. So I'll take a callback and I'll just replace this with callback. Now I can use this state handler in here. So I'll be just calling state handler with on fulfilled internal, and similarly we'll use this over here, and this should be called with on rejected. Okay, that's good. Now what if the promise is still in pending state? In that case we'll simply push it to the then and catch callbacks that we have. So we'll be just pushing it to these array. So if it's in pending state, this dot then callback dot push, it is going to be a function which will be something like this. We'll push this, and same goes for the catch callbacks, and in here we'll be pushing this. This looks good. We have handled all the cases. We are returning true promise, and this looks good. Now let's implement the catch method as well. So in catch we only get this on rejected, and in this case what we can do is we can just return this dot then, and we'll mark on fulfilled as null, and then we'll pass on this, and this should take care of my catch section. Fine. Okay, now we have missed implementing our resolve promise, so let's implement this. Now this will take these 4 things to return this result and resolve and reject. So first thing we'll be checking here is the promise that we have, and whatever we have got after resolving those callback handler shouldn't be same. If they are same, that means we have case where we have a chaining in the then a cycle in that then callback chaining. So we'll just reject this in this case, saying new error, and it should be detected cycle in promise chaining. Now if you're wondering when would this case will hit, so let's consider example where you have something like promise p1 and this is like new promise, and then you have resolve and you are actually resolving it with something like p1 again. So in this case what will happen, you will resolve it with the p1. So in here if you see, your result will become p1 and you will pass it as a result, and this will encounter into this case where the promise that you have created and the promise that you are receiving back is same. So this will result in a cycle of promise. Okay, so now what we'll be doing is we'll check if the promise that we have, if it's an instance of promise. If this is instance of promise, else in else we'll just resolve it with result, and if it is unpromised then we need to handle the cases. So if it's unpromised, what we'll be doing is we'll be calling result dot then. Now we'll call this method with then should be called with these two, on fulfilled and all rejected, right? So we'll be calling it with those two methods, and we'll pass this resolve. This is the new return value, like value with which this promise has been resolved with, and then we'll pass these two back, which will resolve this, which will be used to resolve these promises. And this is on fulfilled part, and then we'll have the reject part where we'll have the error, and they should just reject with that error. So I'll be doing something like this, reject with error. So here we are recursively just calling this resolve promise in case we are getting back promise again. So this looks good. I think we have covered everything. I think we can also implement these methods where we have these static properties called resolve and reject. So the resolve and reject method also returns a promise, and here we'll receive a value. So here what we can do is we can return new my promise, and this will have resolve and reject, and from here we'll be just calling resolve with this value. And similarly in reject we will have error, and from in here we'll be calling reject with that error. So this should take care of the static properties called resolve and reject. Now let's try to test this. So what I'll do is I'll create a promise object called p1. Let's say new.myPromise, and let's say set timeout, pass it resolve after, and this should be my data. And then first I'll do p1 dot, then and I'll just say console log. Let's see if I run this code what happens. I'll open the terminal, I'll say node promise polyfill js, and it prints me p1, which is good. Let's do a chaining on this. So what I'll do is I'll say data, and from in here I'll return a string literal saying data, and then I'll say from first then, and let's do dot then here as well. And here what I'll do is just console log. So I'll just see that it should be printing this. I'll run it again, and we are getting this promise from first this time, which is good. Now let's create another promise called p2, and what I'll be doing from here is I'll return p2, which is again a promise, and we'll just console log this. So now we should be seeing both of them. What I have done, let's grab this and paste it here, save it. Now I should be seeing data from first then, and then I should be seeing p2. So let's test it. What I'm getting is p1 from first then, and then some promise object I'm getting. So if I am returning something from then, something is wrong. So p1 it came here, and from here it returned p2, and then I have dot then, so it should print me p2. Okay, what went wrong? Let's see. So if this is a promise, let's see what we are getting in here. Let's say whatever we are getting in here, we'll do is console log is data instance of my promise, which should be true, and then data state is also fulfilled. Then why I'm not seeing p2? It is this dot value, which is good. This is the state handler. This callback is this dot value. So I'll also put a console log here to see if this is going wrong. This dot value, this dot value, save it, let's run it. P1, we are getting P1 as this dot value, then we have true, and in here we are getting this as this dot value, which is not correct. Okay, when we return something, this is an instance of promise. So how I'm checking, where is, oh shit, this should be instance of my promise. Save it, run it again. Okay, I think now I'm getting, so just do console log and see what I'm getting here. Console log, save it, clear it. We have too many values. Let's get rid of these ones. Save it. Do we have any more? No. And then I'll save it again. So now we are getting the correct result. We have this and P2 from here, which is good. Let's do one thing. Let's test the catch part also. So I'll be doing res and reject, and just get rid of this, and this should be catch whatever we are getting. We should be seeing that. Let's get rid of this, save it, run it, nothing. So we are getting nothing again. Oh, it should be reject. Save it, and now run it again. Okay, now we have this P1 error, which is correct. So now we have tested it, it's working fine. So this is how we can implement our own version of promise. I hope you got something to learn from this video. We also did some debugging as well, so hope that is also helpful. Please do let me know if you like the video, and put some suggestions in comment if you have some topic on mind which you think I should make some video on. That's all for today. Thank you.